Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone from the band The Cutting Crew, it is Nick Van Eede. They have a new album out called Ransomed Healed Restored Forgiven. And of course, we talk about Kevin MacMichael, great Canadian songwriter and guitarist and member of Cutting Crew. We remember him as he passed away a few years ago. And we also discussed the band working with Rush producer Terry Brown. Anyway, here on Rock Talk, we talk about all rock, anything, especially from the 80s, and we do it in a positive context, always supporting the artist. Anyway, here is, from the Cutting Crew, the one, the only, Nick Van Eede. We are speaking with the Cutting Crew's Nick Van Eede, the new album, Ransomed Healed Restored and Forgiven, recorded with the Prague and Slovenia Philharmonic Orchestras. Great stuff. As we say in Montreal, bonjour, and I know you've been to Canada a lot, so you understand bonjour.
Bonjour, yeah, comment ça va?
Ça va très bien.
Je suis enchanté.
Yes. Well, let me start with that just real quick, because a lot of bands look at the Cutting, or a lot of bands, fans I should say, look at the Cutting Crew as a European band or a UK band, but truth be told, you sort of cut your teeth in Canada for the most part, going back with the Drivers and Tears On Your Anorak all the way over to Cutting Crew. You were sort of like hometown heroes in a sense, right?
Yeah, Canada's always been there. By accident to start with, the Drivers were a band that got signed up to a very odd record label in Toronto by a guy who was eventually arrested by federal police. But that's when we met and became good friends with Terry Brown. Obviously, his story goes without any introduction with Rush. And when the album was being recorded, the Cutting Crew album was being recorded, we were going around in circles slightly, and I called for the cavalry, and Terry said, well, when do you need me? And I said, tomorrow. He said, okay. And he got on the plane and flew over and took charge. So yeah, and of course, much more important than that, Kevin MacMichael, my long dear departed guitarist, was a Maritimer. So I've lived in Nova Scotia many times over the years.
Yes, and I do want to talk about Kevin as well. He did, of course, pass away, so my sympathies, and of course, may he rest in peace. But let us talk quickly about this album, and then we'll look back on some of the history. So, Ransomed Healed, Restored, and Forgiven. Talk to me about putting these songs together with a Philharmonic, because to put it together and have an arrangement and do a pop song and use a Lynn drum and have Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero twist some knobs, that's pretty simple. But reimagining them and having to have completely new arrangements is a whole different ballgame. So talk to me about the challenge and, of course, the joy. I mean, it's not negative, of putting together the album.
Yeah, well, it was daunting. I mean, when I was offered it, first of all, since 1985, good people like yourselves, fans, my mum, everybody has said, that your songs would work so well with an orchestra. And I've always said, well, thank you. It doesn't mean they're better songs than anybody else's, but the way Kevin and I wrote them, the way we layered stuff and had like motifs from his guitar. So it's always been a dream. And when it was offered, it was that kind of, yes, I'd love to, but as, the expression, leave well enough alone, was staring me in the face. Why would you want to start tinkering with songs, some of them which are very, very big songs in people's memories? But we did it, and my God, it was complicated. And a very emotional journey, and I don't mean that in a hokey way. There were some very beautiful moments.
There were some gorgeous moments. I will, of course, ask you about I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight, but I'm going to put it this way. Years ago, I was friends with Doug Feger of the Knack, and of course, he's passed away as well. And I was talking to Doug, and I was saying, boy, man, it must be so great to have written My Sharona. My God, well, if I could write a song like that, I'd have it made. And he said, you know what? He said it was like a golden albatross, and I'll never forget those two words. And I go, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. He goes, on one hand, Mitch, you see that pool, and it bought me all of that. But on the other hand, it limited what I could do creatively.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. It's 11 in the morning. But he said...
You put your emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yes, I did. But he said it limited me because every time I would write a song, I would go to the record company and they'd go, "That's great, Doug, but I don't hear another My Sharona. Could you try again?" Is it possible that a song like "I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight," which made you a success, was number one, could it be a golden albatross like Doug described? Or was that your experience as well?
Back then, after the first album, we had the audacity, that's why the press hated us, we had the audacity to come from nowhere and have this big smash. And then, so immediately on that second album, we got that shit from the record company, We really love the album. Americans have taken charge by now. We really love the album, guys. Some really good deep cuts there, but we're not hearing that "Die in Your Arms." So that hurt, that stung, and of course, you deal with it how you will. 10 years later, hey, that song is my passport. She's my bank manager. She's my lover. I mean, we have a lot of fun together. We've embraced it, and but I hear what Doug was saying. But no, only for a couple of years with me. Only for a couple of years.
Oh, really? But it did happen. The record company did sort of give you that nod, wink, wink, like, dude, that's cool, but yeah, I don't hear it. Which it's got to be frustrating.
But as you'll hear over the albums that we've made since, I've always tried to push forward and be brave and take risks, and so that's what we did, and maybe that's why, we didn't go on to sell another 5 million albums, but I'm proud of each one we've done, and so bringing it, round to Ransomed, Healed, Restored, Forgiven, which, by the way, do you know where those 4 words come from, Mitch?
No, I do not.
Don't? Well, it's an Anglican hymn. When I was a kid, I used to go to Sunday school, there's nothing else to do on a Sunday morning, and I'm not a church person now, but it was from a song, a hymn called "Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven." So here you go. Praise my soul, the King of Heaven, to his feet thy tribute bring, ransomed, healed, restored, forgiven. And I wrote down those words about 20 years ago, I remember, not as a kid, and I thought when we were doing this project, well, we've been ransomed. They're going to pay a bit of money. Hopefully, we're going to heal the songs and restore them, and most importantly, hopefully, the fans will forgive me for doing it.
Oh, hey, listen, it worked. All right, so the album Broadcast, which was sort of the big breakout album that had the song, had Terry Brown, as you mentioned, and of course, for Canadians, Terry Brown did everything Rush. He did Max Webster. He did Lauren Gowan. He did Moist. And yes, by the way, I'm naming all the bands that I have friends in. Because that's how...
He did Klaatu as well. Do you remember Klaatu?
Yes, I do. He also did April Wine, and boy, just a lot of great stuff. So talk to me how you got Terry Brown involved. Because listen, you do The Drivers. You do Tears on Your Anorak. It's got a little modicum of success. But how do you get the guy that's producing Rush, or has produced Rush, to land on your album?
Well, as I said before, the album started in New York, and we recorded a couple of tracks. We went back to Britain, and we were involved with another producer that doesn't have to be named. He wasn't working out, and we'd become firm friends by then, but that didn't mean that he was going to come over and rescue anything. But we knew how to make records, Terry and I. He has that great ability to just sit there as the other ear and come in, and of course he's a sensational engineer. But I called him, it was 1 a.m. from Air Studios on Oxford Street in London. We're drowning, we have this new record deal. We've been to New York where, the record company's going, oh, that's getting a little difficult, this cutting crew. And we weren't being difficult, we just wanted a producer. And I called him, and as I said, he flew over. And within weeks, he'd got us into Chipping Norton Studios, very famous old studios in Oxfordshire, and a flagon of beer under the desk every night, and it never turned back from there. It never turned back.
Wow, that's great. And of course, you do have that team, which we mentioned, and I'm going to go through this, of Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero. Now, at that time, they were doing a lot of the pop stuff. Eventually, they became sort of the heavy metal guys by doing the Teslas and the Metallicas and stuff. What did they bring to the game? And because those two guys together are a dynamic duo. Yeah,
that was very special. That was the first thing that ever happened. You see, Branson Branson knew that we should be produced by North Americans. I mean, he knew that we had that guitar. We were a guitar band. We weren't hard rock or anything, but we certainly weren't just pop. So he sent us to New York, and this old converted church, Midtown, a place called Media Sounds that Steve and Michael used a lot. So we met them, and we recorded 2 or 3 tracks, but the one that stood out was I've Been in Love Before. That's their production, and I think that's one of the most gorgeous records I've ever made. Michael was all over it. I remember him saying, he came in one morning with a big smile on his face. We'd only just recorded it. And I said, what's the matter? He said, I think I'm the first guy to have made love to that song.
That's what songs are for. All right, so let's look at the career. So Broadcast comes out. You've got a #1 single. It goes up to number 16 on the Billboard 200 album chart. Scattering comes out a couple of years later. Goes up to 150. It's doing good. Then Compass comes out. Talk to me about the challenges of keeping the train moving forward. And by the time you get to 92, 93, why does it sort of run out of steam? What was going on? And was it just too difficult? And does it have a little bit to do with what I was saying before, that you've got such a big hit that people go, all right, where's the other big hit?
Definitely that, yeah. Obviously, radio had already made that decision, I think. And everything changed, Mitch. I mean, I could see it. I'm sure everybody could see it, but we were still in the studio recording 6-minute long, big rock ballads or whatever, quirky stuff with all the headphone shit going on and all that. And in Britain, anyway, we had people like Soul to Soul and Nana Cherry coming along with these very cool, urban grooves and just delicious, new, bright, colorful things. I remember one night at the studios, we were recording the 3rd album, Compos Mentis, and we just delivered it. We just finished it, and this very ominous bunch of guys in suits were coming around and into the studio. We've never seen these guys before, and they were basically coming to talk to us about, the fact that we would be leaving the label that night, and that was the night Virgin got rid of, I think, 85 bands, and they were all the bands that had served him well. But it was time to move on. There was a whole new generation of pop music coming in.
Yeah, and it changed everything. We outgo the Lynn drums, and in came whatever came in.
Yeah, and it was great, and I get that. I absolutely get it, and it needed it as well. So we carried on, but in the end, Kevin and I looked at each other. He went on to join Robert Plant's band, and I did a bit of pretended I could be a manager, and I wasn't.
Well, I did want to ask about the Fate of Nations, but before we get to Fate of Nations, I do want to stick with you. So the band disbands and new sounds come in. Okay, fine. At some point, Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford of Genesis give you a call, and you and Ray Wilson are battling it out to be the next singer of Genesis. And I will say for the record, the Ray Wilson album is good, underrated gem. But talk to me about that. How do Tony, I mean, obviously you've all been sort of in the same music circles, and I know a guy who knows Nick. Okay. But what was the process like for you?
Yeah, that was, especially as Gabriel era Genesis were my total heroes. I remember shaving my head right down the front like Peter did, coming and sitting down next to Mum and Dad when I was about 14 years old. So this was the stuff dreams are made of. Chris Neal, our producer on Compos Mentis, put my name forward, and they sent, this is in the days of cassettes, can you imagine? They sent me a box of about 12 cassettes, and on each cassette was the songs they wanted me to sing, with the backtracks and the lyrics and all that kind of stuff, and, tricky ones like Turn It On Again with all those, I get so lonely. And I used to make these little kind of strange musical charts showing all those pushes. Then there'll be the tricky ones, the high ones, the slow ones, all that. Anyway, so then I turned up at their studios over in beautiful Surrey in southeast England, and they were there, and I walked in, and they said, okay, right then. Well, Mike speaks very, hello, Nick. Would you just go through and start away then? And I said, well, where's the band? Where's the band? He said, no band here today. Just sing along to the backtracks. And I thought, oh shit, because in their letter they put, if any of the keys were a little high, the band will change key. So all I can say is I think it was on Tonight. I think I nearly ripped my voice to pieces. It was a beautiful experience.
That's
I remember
hilarious.
sitting down afterwards and playing Carpet Crawlers on my guitar with Mike singing it and Tony playing keyboards. So beautiful. Ray got the job, and I'll savor the memory forever, though.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Calling All Stations is an underrated album. Did you sing or have any part in the making of any of those songs? Were any of them, like, hey, let's write a couple of songs and see where it goes, and then, Ray ends up singing them? Or did you have absolutely no involvement in that?
Absolutely nothing, no.
Okay.
It was done. It was dusted. I was getting married on June the 15th in 1996, and in the morning, when you're running around getting your buttonholes and make sure your suit's pressed and everything, the phone rang, and it was Mike, and he said, "Hi Nick, it's Mike Rutherford here from Genesis." I went, "Oh my God." And he said, we really loved you. You were the chap, but there's just some high end, sort of range difficulties we had. I hope I haven't spoilt your day. And I said, no, not at all. I'm getting married in 3 hours.
That's hilarious. I do want to ask, so the audition, you show up and you're going to play the tracks, because I can just imagine it's got to be somewhat self-defeating. You're all pumped up. I'm going to be with the guys. We're going to jam. And then it's like, all right, I'm just going to hit play.
Absolutely. I was so keen. I thought Chester might be there and all these people. And I remember when Tonight was the high one, I said to the engineer, I said, well, what are we going to do about the key? He said, well, I can put my fingers on the reel and slow it down if you want me to.
Oh my God! Did you show up that day with a whole bunch of vinyls under your arm with a Sharpie in the left hand, going, where are the guys? Where are the guys? Where are the guys?
I'm far too cool for that. Come on.
Jokes aside, were there any demos made of that? If I go to YouTube and stuff, can folks hear that stuff, or have you ever covered the songs live just for the fun of it?
Genesis. Well, we did First of Fourth a couple of times as cutting crew. But no, I tell you what is, I don't know if anything exists or not, but this is a true story. This sounds like a Genesis interview. I went to, my drummer is a complete Genesis nut, and when that studio closed down, they sold up everything. They sold all the hardware, everything from the toilet rolls or whatever. And he was over there, and fans, the top 50 fans who won access were allowed to walk around the studio. And he walked and he saw this, like an area where lots of cassettes were thrown in, and it said Nick Van Eede demo sessions. And I said, my God, why didn't you pinch it? Steal it. He never did. So I think there is a cassette out there somewhere.
Oh, that's terrible. Ransomed Healed Restored and Forgiven, of course, is out. Let me ask you just real quick. Normally, the next question is, are you going to take this on the road with the orchestra? Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But eventually, it might happen. Do you see yourself maybe in 2021, 2022, or God forbid, 2030, when they say we can go back to shows, that you will want to take this out on the road and do the whole treatment with the strings?
Absolutely right to point out who knows when that will happen. It's been just, nothing for the next 7 or 8 months now. But we have 6 symphony halls booked with another 80s band next May in Britain. So we're hoping that we're going to get a promoter to see that and bring us out to the States and Canada, because it would obviously, it's an expensive thing to move around. We'd have to use local orchestras and so on. But no, we have 6 definite dates. So very excited about that.
Oh, I do hope they come through. A few years ago, I took my son to see the Lego Batman movie, and I Just Died in Your Arms was in the movie. How important is it for an artist like yourself to have songs on soundtracks, and what does it do for you? Because here this comes out 30 years later. Does it create a new interest other than just the financial stuff? What does it do for you, just career-wise?
Yeah. Well, it's pretty cool. I mean, yes, you're right. You get paid well for those kind of things, and it's very lucky all these years later to have that song, just like Mitch, just like Doug's and other people's. They seem to have legs, and they just even get bigger really over the years. So when you can get something on a different generations movie, or like it was on Stranger Things on the opening season opener. Sorry. You can see it happen. Not so much in sales with Spotify, it's gone berserk. But you see it happening on the people that join the Facebook and Twitter accounts, and they're younger. And of course, my daughter and my nieces are all find it hilarious. So yeah, it's gratifying. And of course, it's the biggest scene in Batman, isn't it? I mean, he looks up and sees the new female commissioner, and this camp moment. Oh, I'm very proud of it.
You should be. Listen. It's a fabulous song. It is easily to say an iconic song. I mean, everybody knows it, even if you're not a fan of the genre. It's that good. Kevin MacMichael. He of course is from New Brunswick, a Canadian. He was in the band. Has since passed away. May he rest in peace. He did that time with Robert Plant. Talk to me a little bit about that. Were you aware, obviously you're aware that he's with Robert Plant, but did he phone you up someday and say, hey, listen, you won't believe who called me. It's Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. Talk to me. Do you know anything about the story of him being with Robert Plant?
Yeah. Well, we were best mates right through till the day I buried him. You know, it was he was the most important man ever in my life, apart from maybe my dad and brother. You know, he was my mentor. He taught me so much about books, and he had no ego. He was a beautiful man. Anyway, when the Cutting Crew were nearing the end, Compos Mentis was the third album we made. And the keyboard player stroke producer we used was a guy called Phil somebody, can't remember. Anyway, he was the keyboard player in Robert's band. And it was quite obvious those two were staying up all night doing all kinds of things. And I was shuffling off to bed trying to keep this album on track. And so they became best friends. And I guess as soon as, and there was no poaching that went on, as soon as Kevin and I looked each other in the eye and said, that's it, we're Cutting Crew, he got the invitation. And it was quite spectacular. I think he went straight into the studio and went for auditions. And he told me beautiful stories about sitting with Robert and expecting to get the guitar out and play all kinds of things. And in the end, Robert just sort of chatted with him, and they both had this big love of 60s, early 70s West Coast American bands, the Moby Grapes and so on. So suddenly Robert was in trance because Kevin could hold court and talk about all these people, the Tim Hardins and so they strapped on the guitar, and I think one of the first songs they ever recorded was If I Were a Carpenter, the Leon Russell song. So there was a bit of a love affair there that went on. I can go on a little bit more if you want.
Yeah. Please do. It's a great story.
Well, I would, Kevin would say, we're playing in a little tiny pub in South London, just nobody knows anything about it. You've got to come along. It's at the Half Moon in Putney. So I saw, whole lot of love. I saw Kashmir. I saw these songs in a pub the size of, our kitchen, with Francis Dunnery from It Bites on the left wing, Kevin on the right wing, Robert in the middle. And Kevin, who'd now grown his hair so long and was playing a Les Paul. Kevin never played Gibsons. He was a Fender guy through and through. Suddenly he's got the big medallion. He's got the chest. Well, he doesn't have a chest, but he had the buttons open, and he's giving down. Oh. It was one of those forever moments. I was so proud of him.
Wow, what a great time. So you're sitting in this bar watching. What's it like to have Robert? Because you look at him now, and he prefers to do these intimate shows, but do you look at that and just go, "Hey, this is the guy from Led Zeppelin who's standing 2 feet from me"? How talk to me a little bit about that experience, about how that must have been.
Yeah, well, if you've been in the music business as long as you and I have been in it, you knock around a lot of very famous people, and mostly it becomes very day to day, and a bit of the shine gets rubbed off because you tend to meet these people, in a hotel lobby or something. But Robert was special because I was huge Jimmy Page fan, but Robert was sex. That was that rock. For me, music, even what I've been doing on this recent album, it has to have sex in it somewhere. And Robert epitomized that, and probably still does as an old geezer. So to see him would him and Bowie were the two, and I never got to meet David. I saw him live, but never got to meet him. So yeah, it was pretty special. But as I said, and I don't mean this unkindly at all, it was just Kevin, off the record in front of millions of people now, wasn't much of a Led Zepp fan, but there he was. If I said to you tomorrow, and he's playing those big blues chords and winking at me.
But listen, a lot of musicians are in bands that they're not fans of. I know a lot of the ghost musicians and and they go do these records and they don't like it, but they're like, hey, gig's a gig, and whatever. Let's just quickly get back to Ransomed Healed Restored and Forgiven. Of course, there is some of the classic songs reimagined. Where do you see yourself in terms of new music, creativity? What am I doing today? Creatively? Well,
Creatively.
Okay, whatever. It's one of those days. It's obviously important to keep writing and keep moving forward and stuff, but at some point there's also the reality of I'm going to go play a show and fans want to hear their favorite 10 tracks, so let's just do that. Do you see yourself wanting to make a new album at any point? And
yeah, no, we released Add to Favorites 3 years ago, which has 12 brand new songs. We play probably 6 of them when we do gigs all around the world. We had brass on it for the first time. We had girl singers, so we were pushing it wider and wider. Recorded live off the floor as well. About 8, 9, 10, 10 of us all standing in the studio. So I've been making albums, right through. A live album 4 years ago. So this one came out of the blue, and I've got half an album already written. So this was just too good to turn down. This was an offer. I didn't go hunting for this. We were approached, and as I said, to put the headphones on and sing a song. Just there's 2 tracks on the album. There's just me and the orchestra, an 80-piece orchestra, was pretty mind-blowing.
yeah, it really was. And on that, I will ask one last question. You did get a Grammy nomination for Best New Artist. What did that mean for you professionally to have the Academy sort of say, not the Academy, I guess, but to have the Grammys sort of say, hey, listen, out of all the bands that are out here this year, you're one of the 5 that we think we're going to say, hey, you deserve to win this?
Yeah, it was a big deal. I was very proud. It came 1 week after my dad died. So I was in New York buying sheet music for the organist to play at his funeral 2 hours before we went to Radio City Music Hall. So it was a very bittersweet memory. But as far as career goes, yeah, very proud. We didn't win. Jodie Watley won, and I remember there was this, who gives a damn in the end? But I remember our record company getting so upset because Jodie had already been nominated before in Shalimar or something, and it was like they wanted to have a revote. It was like, hey, get on with it. My memory of that night is being invited to Prince's party down in Soho, somewhere in New York, and again, this sounds like I'm making fun, but I'm not. But he's so diminutive, shall we say. We never saw him because it was so full, but we saw his bouncers walking around. We saw 4 bouncers walking around, and we could only presume that he was in the middle of them.
That's kind of funny. And from what I know with people at Prince parties, for some reason, he always wanted it to be very, very dark. And it's just like, why? Anyway, but I don't know how it was for you that night, but that's what I've heard. Anyway, Ransomed Healed Restored Forgiven, recorded with the Prague and Slovenia Philharmonic Orchestras. Do check that out. And as we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup. Absolute pleasure. Merci.
Thank you. Merci. Au revoir. And just one last thing from me, as you know, if coming from Canada, my heart goes out to all of the Nova Scotians with the dreadful stuff that happened last week. I've got 100 friends out there, and it must have been a real shock to the system, especially in Canada. So love to you all.
Thank you. And I have to say, even as you're saying it, first of all, I'm getting goosebumps on the arm, but I still don't believe it in the sense of that doesn't happen here. Yep. And the fact that they drove around for hours, or the person drove around for hours, I'm not going to name the person, they can forget that, drove around for hours, and it was so, Yeah, it's just
premeditation,
Yeah.
it's pure evil. And sorry to finish from me, Mitch. I've done 15 of these with American stations, and I had to watch my tongue slightly because I kind of said what you said. I was saying that you don't expect that to happen in Canada, which means you expect it to happen in the States. And I didn't really mean that, but it is much more common south of the border. So. It was shocking, very shocking, and I love your country so much. It's been there every step of the journey of my life since I was 21 years old.
Absolutely, and we will leave it on that. And rest in peace, everybody we've mentioned today, from Doug Feger to the guitarist, and just sorry, I'm losing my train of thought.
Kevin,
Kevin, sorry. The talking about the Nova Scotia thing has thrown me off. But thank you so much, and we will hopefully see you in Canada shortly to be able to play music and bring joy and happiness to people.
Let's just hope it's that Symphony Hall in Montreal. Bye-bye.
Yeah, cheers now. Bye-bye.
This has been Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. For more exclusive content and interviews, subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, and many more. Follow Mitch on all the socials, especially Twitter, @Mitch Lafon, and on Instagram, @Mitch_Lafon. Get your Mitch merch now at loudtracks.com/Mitch.